The other day, I started my almost yearly rewatch of one of my favorite sitcoms of all time, Boy Meets World. Of course, the show is about young Corey Matthews and his journey through adolescence and early adulthood. But don't worry, this isn't some Boy Meets World retrospective. There are already plenty of those. What really inspired me was not a certain plot of the show, or Corey or Topanga, or really any of the other main characters. It was his sister Morgan Matthews, who was most likely the least talked about Matthews, and really just the least talked about character of the mainstays of the cast. I will give a little hint of why she inspired me.
Yes, I'm stuck here and I can't get down. My parents are outside fighting.
I can't believe you're my brother. Ew.
As you could tell, well, unless you're blind or something I suppose, these two people are not the same. And that is exactly what I will be talking about in this video today. Recasts. Specifically the Recast Iceberg that I made. And if somehow you don't know, an iceberg chart is just a way of organizing information, where the most well-known or surface level topics are at the top, and the deeper you go, the more obscure, surprising, or disturbing the information becomes. From TV shows to games to cartoons, everything Recast is on this iceberg. Without further ado, let's get into Tier 1. Geralt of Rivia is the main character of The Witcher, a fantasy series created by Polish author, there it is. He's basically a genetically enhanced monster hunter who travels around killing horrific creatures for money while looking permanently annoyed to be there the whole time. The books became massively popular and eventually led to video games, comics, and of course the Netflix live-action adaptation The Witcher. Now casting Geralt was always going to be risky because this character already had a gigantic fan base before the show even existed. Fans of the books loved him, fans of the games loved him, and people are not exactly known for reacting calmly when adaptations change things or get casting wrong, as we've seen by the recent Harry Potter stuff. But somehow, Netflix managed to land basically the perfect choice. Henry Cavill. Not only did Cavill look weirdly accurate as Geralt, but he also was a huge fan of the source material. He reportedly pushed hard for it to be made, already knew the lore, and gave input on the character because he was such a Witcher nerd before filming even started. And honestly, when season 1 released in December 2019, it looked like Netflix had a massive hit on their hands. The show is successful, audiences loved it, and even though some hardcore fans weren't thrilled about certain changes from the books, almost everyone agreed on one thing: Henry Cavill was Geralt. Seriously, even people who didn't love the show usually still loved him in the role. But then, things started getting messy. As seasons 2 and 3 developed, reports started coming out about creative disagreements behind the scenes between Cavill and the writers. Cavill reportedly wanted the series to stay closer to the original books, while the writers wanted to take the story in their own direction. Now, none of this turned into some gigantic screaming match or anything, but there was clearly enough tension that fans started noticing something felt off. Season 2 still performed fairly well, but by Season 3, a lot of viewers had really started turning on the show. Ratings dropped, criticism got louder, and fans became increasingly frustrated with how far the story had drifted from the books. Then came the moment that basically destroyed everyone's confidence in the series. Before Season 3 had even released, Henry Cavill announced that he was leaving The Witcher and would not return as Geralt. He later confirmed that creative differences played a role in the decision, along with wanting to pursue other projects such as returning to be Superman in the DCEU. And for a lot of fans, that was the breaking point. Because at this stage, Cavill wasn't just the lead actor anymore, he was the identity of the whole show. Netflix then announced that Liam Hemsworth would replace Cavill as Geralt starting in Season 4. And people did not react well to the news at all. The backlash online was brutal. Now, to be fair to Liam Hemsworth, most people didn't really blame him personally. He kind of walked into an impossible situation. Replacing an actor that fans strongly associated with the role is very difficult. But replacing the one part of the show audiences still universally liked, yeah, good luck with that. Season 4 ended up being received even worse than Season 3, and most of the criticism focused on the writing and overall direction rather than Hemsworth himself, although there was a lot of hate towards him as well. By that point, the hype surrounding The Witcher had massively dropped compared to the excitement around Season 1. The show is now expected to end with Season 5 in 2026, but the excitement around the series is nowhere near what it once was during the Cavill era. And because Henry Cavill became so closely tied to the role, this ended up becoming one of the most talked about TV recasts in recent years, and one that arguably changed the entire trajectory of the show. Albus Dumbledore is one of the most important characters in the Harry Potter series, and his recast was one of the most notable and unavoidable recasts in movie history. And you probably know who Albus Dumbledore is, but I guess a brief summary I'll say is he's the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Wizardry, and he's a mentor to Harry Potter, and that's pretty much all you need to know. But let's jump back to the first film, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone if you're outside of the US. Because the search for Harry, Ron, and Hermione got so much media attention, the role of Dumbledore actually wasn't talked about as much during casting. The role eventually went to legendary Irish actor Richard Harris. Before Harry Potter, Harris was already a very well-known actor, especially for playing King Arthur in the 1967 film Camelot, a role that won him a Golden Globe. But interestingly, he almost wasn't Dumbledore at all. He actually turned down the role 3 separate times because he was older and didn't want to commit to filming a long series of movies. The story goes that his granddaughter told him she would never speak to him again if he didn't take the role, which is ultimately what convinced him to join the films. Harris quickly became a beloved part of the cast. He was known for being kind and patient with the younger actors on set, and his portrayal of Dumbledore in The Sorcerer's Stone was widely praised. His version of Dumbledore was very book accurate, calm, gentle, soft-spoken, and wise, more like a quiet grandfather than a powerful wizard. He returned for the second film, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, which began filming in late 2001 and finished in 2002. But during this time, Harris became very ill. In August 2002, he was hospitalized with pneumonia and was also diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a serious form of cancer. Sadly, he passed away on October 25th, 2002, just weeks before Chamber of Secrets was released in theaters. The film came out on November 15, 2002, and while it was successful and well received, there was obviously a very somber feeling surrounding it due to his death. Before he passed away, Harris had actually said he would want his friend, actor Peter O'Toole, to replace him as Dumbledore if anything had ever happened to him. However, the role ultimately went to Michael Gambon instead. Gambon was a very respected and accomplished stage and film actor, so people didn't doubt his acting ability. However, fans were a little skeptical at first because Gambon openly admitted he had never read the Harry Potter books and also said he would not try to copy Richard Harris's performance. That made fans nervous because Harris's version of Dumbledore was already so loved. Gambon first appeared as Dumbledore in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and after the film released, most fans ended up accepting him in the role. However, his portrayal was noticeably different. While Harris played Dumbledore as very calm, quiet, and gentle, Gambon played him as a more intense, louder, more energetic version of Dumbledore. This version actually fit the later movies well, since the series became darker and more serious as it went on. Gambon would go on to play Dumbledore for the rest of the Harry Potter films, meaning the character ended up being split into 2 distinct portrayals across the series. In a way, Dumbledore wasn't just recast, the character just evolved. Richard Harris gave us the gentle, soft-spoken version, and Michael Gambon stepped in to the role during very difficult circumstances and brought a more intense, commanding presence that matched the darker direction of the later films. 2 very different performances, but both became iconic in their own way. In 1997, Batman and Robin released and basically killed the Batman movie franchise. The movie was extremely campy, overly silly, and just all over the place tonally. It was so poorly received that director Joel Schumacher actually apologized for the movie afterward, and Warner Bros. Put Batman movies on hold for years. After about 7 years, Warner Bros. Decided to try again, but this time they wanted a darker, more realistic Batman inspired by crime films like Heat and The Godfather. The idea came from a young director named Christopher Nolan, who pitched a grounded, realistic Batman story, and the studio approved. Casting began in 2003, and the lineup was stacked. Christian Bale as Batman, Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow, Michael Caine as Alfred, and Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, as a lot of people say, but I will never say it. They originally considered using Harvey Dent in the first movie, but since they couldn't fully develop Two-Face yet, they created a new character instead, Rachel Dawes, Bruce Wayne's childhood friend and love interest, inspired by a mix of characters from the comics. In Batman Begins, Rachel Dawes was played by Katie Holmes. Her role was somewhat of a damsel in distress type character, but she still had strong morals and wasn't afraid to call Bruce out when he needed it. Holmes did a solid job, but she really wasn't the standout of the movie, which is understandable when you're acting next to multiple Oscar winners. Batman Begins was a huge success, and Warner Bros. Immediately greenlit a sequel, The Dark Knight. Rachel Dawes was expected to return, but Katie Holmes chose not to reprise her role and instead starred in the movie Mad Money. The decision opened the door for Maggie Gyllenhaal to take over the role of Rachel Dawes. And this is where the recast actually worked in the movie's favor. Gyllenhaal's version of Rachel feels more independent, more confident, and more emotionally complex. She isn't just Bruce's love interest anymore. She feels like her own character with her own moral compass. A perfect example is her confrontation with the Joker, when she refuses to show fear and stands up to him, which makes her character feel more strong, and makes what happened to her later in the film hit much harder emotionally, which she, well, I guess I won't spoil it, but the movie is like 15 years old at this point, so you should know what happens. While Katie Holmes likely made the decision she thought was best for her career at the time, in hindsight, it's not hard to see that she made the absolute wrong decision. Mad Money underperformed at the box office. While The Dark Knight didn't just succeed, it became one of the most celebrated superhero movies ever made, and is widely considered one of the greatest films of all time. Back in the early 90s, Marvel Entertainment was booming, comics were selling like crazy, and people were buying multiple copies of issues thinking they'd be worth millions someday, and characters like Spider-Man and Wolverine were everywhere. Overall, Marvel was on top of the world, and then they completely fumbled the bag. Marvel expanded way too aggressively, buying trading card companies and other businesses right before the comic market collapsed. Sales tanked, and by 1996, Marvel actually filed for bankruptcy. To stay alive, they started selling movie rights to their biggest characters. Spider-Man went to Sony, X-Men and Fantastic Four went to Fox, and Hulk went to Universal, along with several smaller characters being on the move as well. But one of the characters they eventually got back the rights to was Iron Man, and that changed everything. Fast forward to 2008, and Iron Man releases, directed by Jon Favreau, and starred Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. The movie was a huge success, and basically launched what would become the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it today. Tony Stark's best friend, James Rhodey Rhodes, was played by Terrence Howard, and here's the crazy part. He was actually one of the highest paid actors in the first movie. He was making more than Robert Downey Jr., which sounds absolutely insane how now considering Downey became the face of a $30 billion franchise. But when it came time for Iron Man 2, Marvel cut Howard's salary massively, reportedly from $8 million down to about $1 million. Howard said he was promised a multi-film deal and wasn't happy about the pay cut. Marvel and Howard couldn't decide on a deal, and he ultimately walked away from the role. So Rhodey was recast with Don Cheadle, and Marvel handled the recast in the funniest way possible. In Iron Man 2, Don Cheadle shows up as Rhodey, looks at Tony Stark, and literally says,
"Look, it's me. I'm here. Deal with it. Let's move on."
Which is basically Marvel talking directly to the audience. At first, fans definitely noticed the change. I mean, recasts are always jarring, but Cheadle quickly made the role his own. He played Rhodey a little more serious, more military, more dry humor, and once he became War Machine, most people completely forgot there was ever another Rhodey. And this is where the recast story gets a little brutal. Don Cheadle went on to appear in over 10 Marvel movies and Disney Plus shows and became a staple of the MCU for over a decade. Meanwhile, Terrence Howard's career went in a different direction. He's still acting, but he's also become known for some very strange interviews and claims, including trying to invent his own new form of mathematics, which is not something most formal Marvel actors are known for. So while Howard absolutely had the right to negotiate or walk away, it's difficult to ignore the outcome. He didn't just lose the role, he lost the long game, or should I say, the end game. When people talk about famous recasts in TV history, you can't avoid Aunt Vivian from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. This might actually be one of the most infamous recasts ever, not just because it happened on one of the most popular TV shows in the 90s, but because of the drama behind it. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air premiered in 1990 and starred Will Smith as a fictionalized version of himself, a street-smart kid from Philadelphia sent to live with his rich relatives in Bel-Air. The show was funny, but it also had a lot of heart, and one of the most important characters early on was Will's Aunt Vivian, or Vivian Banks, originally played by Janet Huber. Huber's Aunt Viv wasn't just a background TV mom. She was a strong and confident character and didn't take nonsense from anyone, especially Uncle Phil or Will. She was also a dancer and a professor, and she brought a lot of energy to the role. Many fans from the early seasons consider her the best character in the whole show, but behind the scenes, things were not going well. For years, the story was that Janet Huber had conflicts with Will Smith and producers over salary, screen time, and the direction of the show, and that she was difficult to work with as well. By the end of season 3, in 1993, she was gone. At the start of season 4, Aunt Viv returned, but was played by actress Daphne Maxwell Reid instead, and the show didn't try to hide it either. In fact, they made a joke about it in the very first episode after the recast, basically acknowledging that she looked different.
You know, Miss Banks, since you had that baby, there's something different about you.
But the bigger change wasn't her face, it was the character. The new Aunt Viv was much calmer, quieter, and was a more traditional sitcom mom. She was less strict and less fiery, and overall went from being one of the strongest personalities in the house to more of a background parent character. She's one of those recasts where it didn't feel like a new actor, it felt like a completely different character, just in the wrong way. The story doesn't end there. In the 2020 reunion special for The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Janet Huber and Will Smith finally sat down and talked after nearly 30 years, and a lot of new information came out. Hubert revealed that during season 3, she was dealing with an abusive marriage and was also pregnant at the time, which made everything in her life extremely difficult. She also said NBC offered her a very bad contract where she would have been heavily reduced in the show and was not allowed to do any other acting outside of Fresh Prince. So from her perspective, she felt like she was being pushed out and trapped professionally at the same time. Smith opened up about how young and inexperienced he was when filming the show, talking about the pressure he felt carrying a hit sitcom so early in his career and how that affected the way he treated people on set. He also talked about how much he had changed since then after 2 marriages and raising children, and said that looking back, he realizes he didn't understand what Janet Hubert was going through at the time, especially as a woman dealing with so many different issues. Smith admitted that he did make the situation harder for her during production, and that he regretted how everything played out. Hearing that completely changed how many fans viewed the recast. For decades, people thought it was just ego and drama, but the reality was more complicated and a lot more personal. The Fantastic Beasts series was the prequel movie series to Harry Potter that first released in 2015. It covers the adventures of Newt Scamander and his journey to fight the evil Grindelwald with the help of a young Dumbledore and others. Grindelwald was the main bad dark wizard before Voldemort showed up, and was first properly introduced at the end of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, where the character was revealed to actually be played by Johnny Depp. He then became the main villain in the sequel, Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. Now from the very beginning, Depp's casting was controversial. Around the same time he was cast, his very public legal issues and abuse allegations involving his ex-wife Amber Heard were all over the news. Some fans were excited because Johnny Depp playing a weird evil wizard seemed perfect. Other fans were not happy at all. Warner Bros. And even J.K. Rowling publicly defended the decision to keep Depp in the role, and the movie stuck with him through the second movie. But then things got worse. With all the drama with his court cases, Warner Bros. Knew this relationship had to end soon. He technically wasn't fired, but Warner Bros. Asked him to resign, and he did. The wild part is, because of his contract, he was still paid around $16 million, even though he had only filmed one scene for the third movie. That might be the most expensive one-scene performance in movie history. So now, Warner Bros. Had a huge problem. They needed a new Grindelwald in the middle of a franchise. Enter Mads Mikkelsen, who took over the role in Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, and instead of trying to copy Depp, Mikkelsen completely changed the character. Depp's Grindelwald was more flashy and theatrical, while Mikkelsen played him much calmer, colder, and more calculated. Honestly, more like a real dark wizard dictator. And most critics even thought Mikkelsen was better than Depp in the role. But by that point, the Fantastic Beasts franchise already had bigger problems. The second movie had mixed reviews, and the third movie underperformed at the box office. And the whole series was originally supposed to be 5 movies, but it ended after 3 due to this. So the recast didn't kill the franchise, but it definitely didn't save it either. Alright guys, so that is the end of the first tier of the Recast Iceberg. Normally I would put out the whole iceberg or multiple tiers in one video and do like parts, but unfortunately my laptop is not doing too well right now, so I'm either going to fix it or get a new one, and then I will upload multiple parts or multiple tiers in one video for the next one. But anyways guys, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider subbing to the channel and liking the video. Also leave a comment down below on anything you found interesting or anything you think I should have added, or really just anything. I mean, you can do 6, 7, I don't really care. Anyways guys, thanks again. Peace.